All right, guys.
Yeah.
Welcome back. We are here. Special guests. We have Kirk Franklin and Norman and business partners, and Kurt, somebody that obviously everybody knows. Norman, this might be an introduction for people.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a good two-sided conversation. We talk about a variety of different things, but on the business aspect, I think this is good because everybody knows you from your spectacular career as a musician.
Thank you, King.
And an inspiration for people. So we definitely got to talk about that. But, you're doing a lot in the business world as well, and
Yes.
new ventures that you have and different things. So I think that might be interesting for people to hear that level of the conversation. So first and foremost, thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate it.
Honored to be here, man. Honored to be here.
I told you when you walked in, for about 10 seconds, I was like, that's really his voice. And in my mind, Melodies of Heaven is going off right now. So, I mean,
That's
icon it is an understatement, man. We are happy to have you both.
Very, very, very grateful, man.
Happy to be here.
Yes,
So
sir.
how does this working relationship come about? How do you guys meet, and how do you guys formulate some level of partnership?
Well, man, I have been doing music. It's especially in the space of gospel music now for about 32 years, and it has always been deficient with a level of access to professional information, just because of the limited amount of professional and financial growth in the space of gospel music historically. It never was attractive to people that had higher levels of understanding of business, where the acumen was able to really be deposited in people that were really very, very absent of knowing how to be able to maneuver, whether it was music publishing or touring or understanding contracts, understanding the value of what they were contributing to a space. So a lot of times in Black gospel music, you were just really left to just survive on your own. And so just over the last several years, you've seen more younger entrepreneurs, especially men of color, that have seen areas that could be beneficial in these joint spaces for themselves and also for the artists. There was just a space of just lack of information, lack of accessibility. And so over the last decade, I've had a chance to run into this fine young gentleman named Norman Gyamfi. And Norman started out managing artists, bringing opportunities to artists, came from this great space of marketing. And the more I was around him, I understood that it was a secret that was rated from like there was a gem, there was a genius gem that we were not really tapping into to the best of our ability as a genre. And so as he made himself more available, we just became friends, and we just started to try to talk and communicate. And I would have never known that so many things that I was aspiring to do, he had the tools to be able to give me the resources and the knowledge and the information on how to be able to diversify and really become better at that. So over the last 5 years, it has been a wonderful partnership, and I've been so impressed with his acumen and his business compass. And so he started to reach out and to build a bigger conglomerate with other men of color that came from the space of faith curated content. And so he over the last 2 years built this type of new ideal that was attractive to me. I was about to sign again with Sony Records and RCA Records, and it was a really nice offering that they were going to give me again because I'd been in the house for years. But at the same time, I'm looking across the river, and I'm seeing these Black men that are coming together, and they want to be able to really own the space and really be able to give equity and to be able to give voice to individuals like myself. And so I had this incredible choice of going back with a house that was already part of the institution that I knew well, or to take a chance on something that seemed so attractive and something that really looked like other. And it was an outlier from what I'd experienced, and it was the best decision I'd ever made.
So this is Insignia Assets?
Yes.
Yeah. So Norm, obviously we know your iconic career. Was your career always surrounded around faith-based content and music, or how did you get to this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, no, I had nothing to do with music. Definitely not Christian music. I'm an economist and industrial engineer. Went to Georgia Tech, went to Howard. My sister married a gospel artist, Travis Green. And so I started working with him. And from there, I noticed, as Kirk mentioned, a lot of arbitrage, a lot of deficiencies in the marketplace. And the main thing I noticed was that they didn't market music the way that mainstream music did. So I started a marketing company. And then as I started the marketing company, I noticed that a lot of brands, a lot of television, TV, film corporations, a lot of labels needed marketing. They just weren't capturing what they were doing. So that's what we started. We started just capturing everything that we did. You see Chris here right now. As soon as we started working with Kirk, that's what I told him, you got to have a camera on you all the time because people don't believe a lot of what you say. Kirk was in Brazil. You have 50,000 people there. When you hear that, everybody sees something different. My brother-in-law, Travis, went and did a show with 1.1 million people. When I say that, everybody has an idea of what 1.1 million people is. It's a difference when I show you what it looks like. And so when you actually show people and you give this POV of what it's like to be Kirk Franklin, Travis Green, Tasha Cobbs Leonard, Lecrae, whoever, you are showing people that in the Christian music space, we're not all just walking around with choir robes on, jumping around. These are massive brands, iconic brands.
I do jump around them.
that are filling arenas.
Stomps, too.
You know what I mean? And so my main thing when I came into space was to, number one, aggregate and galvanize the most loyal consumer there is, which is the African-American consumer, one, but secondarily, the most loyal consumer is actually believers. People that believe in God are the most loyal consumer in America. They just elected a president. Whether you like it or not, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so when you can aggregate that community, mobilize, and I hate to use the word, but monetize that community, you have a unique opportunity to do something special.
So what exactly is Insignia Assets?
Insignia Assets is a holding company. And so one of the main things I noticed was there was no vertical integration. So I didn't want to have any outside partners. We have no outside partners. We're not taking on any debt. We have a distribution strategic partner, which is the Orchard. That's about it. I work directly with Live Nation in touring, AEG in touring. I work directly. We own our own publishing. We own our own masters. We own everything in-house.
So is it a record label?
It's not a record label. It does everything. We do television, film.
So it's a record label's part of it.
A record label is one part. That's Tribal Records. It's one sole part. Mm-hmm. And we have a publishing division. We have a publishing company. We have a TV film company called Three Diamonds. That's, if you're seeing Den of Kings, it's doing really well right now with Kirk, sat down with DC Young Fly, Lou Young, and
Duvall Ellis. Yeah.
Duvall Ellis.
And Country Wayne.
And Country Wayne. That's still our company.
So it's a 360 offering of everything. Media. Everything. And it's solely based around Christian faith.
That's the genesis. That's our modus operandi. But we work with everybody. We work with Tamar Braxton. You know what I mean? We work with, it doesn't matter if you're faith-based or not. It matters whether you are a brand that can be multifaceted. Tour, podcast, create music, create a book, create an asset that we can then monetize in multiple verticals.
And then what is also interesting about what Norman is saying is that even with your question, is that the unique space and the unique opportunity with this type of platform is that people of color are very diverse and nuanced in that space, is that they go to the club and they go to church too. So you're able to curate content that if it knocks, they'll listen. And if it feels good, they'll come. And so it inspires and aspires at the same time. And that's what made it very unique for me.
As you're watching him build it, and at the time you hadn't signed with them, you hadn't partnered with them, but you're on the other side with the traditional major label, he's watching it saying they're not marketing this right. What's that complexity feel like, right? Like you're watching a friend do something that's really unique and you're kind of on the fence about doing it, but you're stuck in a traditional kind of mindset of marketing and distributing. What is that time period? What was it like for you trying to battle that?
Well, for me, the only tension was my concern of the possibility of there being any unknown challenges with the beautiful personal relationships that were being built. It's because I didn't have good experiences with doing business with people that I'd fallen in love with as brothers. And so that was my trepidation.
So you didn't have relationship? You didn't have good experiences?
I've never had good experiences working with individuals that were also friends and family-like individuals. And so that's what my trepidation was. Now, when it came to me being clear of the deliverables, my first project that I worked with Norman on was a tour. And it was back in 2022. And it ended up being the biggest attended, biggest grossing Christian or gospel tour ever in history. And it was myself in Maverick City. And so when I saw the level of execution on that tour, that's what really sparked my attention, is because I've toured my entire life. In my space, by God's grace, humbly speaking, I've done all of the big tours in my space historically over the last 25 years. But I've never been able to really crack the code on the diversification that normally comes to other artists when they tour. And so working with Norman and his partners, it was just an eye-opening experience. And then we became closer through it. And so that began to be the beginning of me starting to question if it could be something that could really survive in that level of duality.
So let me ask both of you guys this, because you both mentioned that gospel artists don't get marketed the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kirk, from your standpoint, what did you see that was the problem when you was in like the institution? And from your standpoint, on the outside looking in, what did you see that say, okay, they're not doing this correctly. I think that I can add this level of exposure through marketing?
It is very much not being part of the culture. It's that most individuals that work in major systems, they don't go to a local hood church. They're not at the barbershop listening to Sunday sermons. They're not sitting in the Missionary Baptist Church. They're not from that space. So you got to remember that the origin of gospel music was very much about the community and the engaging of the picnic, the barbecues, the 3 o'clock services. And that's why gospel music flourished so much in the 70s and 80s and 90s, because a lot of the labels that were running it back then were still people that were part of the community. They were going to church themselves. They were very much engrafted in the space of the ecosystem of church ideals in the community. But because when you are people of color in America, especially during that period of time, either you or somebody you knew, you were not far removed from the church experience. Even if you didn't go, you lived in a house with somebody that did. You knew somebody that did. So you understood the language, you understood the respect, you understood all of the tenets of that cultural experience, even if you were not always privy to it every week. So what happened is as more corporations began to come and buy the smaller companies in the 90s and in the 2000s, that access of the real experience of the community of church, the language of church, and the heartbeat of the foundational elements of gospel music began to get washed, and they began to get quickly separated from what was happening. And so the more you moved up the higher echelon, you missed the heartbeat of what Christian and gospel music was. And so I started to see it. Everyone started to see it. And so what it created were executives that were trying to work in gospel music, but they could easily work in hip hop because they were going to the clubs. They knew what was happening in the streets. They understood all of the tenets of hip hop culture. But then when they had gospel artists, they didn't know what to do. And so it was a very divine moment for Norman and his partners to really see that happening and to see it as a great business opportunity to be able to tap into those that really needed this bridge of what was and now what was missing.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a couple of points really well. I think the main thing is something that you said is when you talk about the 90s, everybody grew up. I think at that time, 93 to 97% of people went to church. Today, 38 to 41% of people go to church.
Oh, you said 98% of people?
During the 90s.
Men and women of color.
People, no, in the United States.
Okay.
They consider themselves Christian.
You're right.
They went to church
Understood.
once a month at some point in the 90s. That number was in the 90 to 97 percentile in the 90s. So back then, everybody considered themselves Christian. It's just a thing. You go up to somebody, you Christian? It's just a yes. That was I wouldn't call it an enlightenment in America, but as we come into today, that number has dwindled to the low 40s to the mid 30s.
Of people that attend church.
That consider themselves Christian.
Consider themselves Christian.
Or attend church. Yes. We can look it up. Fact check me.
So is that
But no, he's correct. He's correct.
That has a lot to do with the marketing piece. Because the way we market, so there were things you could just say in the 90s, and we just accepted them. Like, you could just say, God bless you. Nowadays, if you just walk up to somebody and say, God bless you, they say, what God? What do you mean by God bless you? It's just certain things that impacts marketing, because if I'm a brand and I know I want to reach a consumer, I may not use a Christian artist because it may offend some audience that wouldn't necessarily be offended.
Gotcha.
There are many communities currently of color, not of color, of sexual orientation, or whatever the case may be. We talk about Roe v. Wade, that are offended by certain belief systems. Whether or not those belief systems actually have oppressive intent is irrelevant. As a brand, I don't have the opportunity to communicate, oh, I don't agree with everything Kirk Franklin believes, or I don't agree with everything XYZ believes. You don't have that opportunity. So I'm just going to shy away from the very mere fact that he says he's a Christian, because it may offend someone. So what I noticed coming into the space was that there was a large group of people that still didn't mind to have someone like Kirk be the spokesman for what they wanted. There wasn't anyone willing to come in and say, hey, I'm going to put my money behind this space and look at ways to correlate them with certain brands, certain companies, certain products, and push that to just our base. Our base is still, like I said, it's the most loyal base you have, period.
When you say your base, what is your, because there's a lot of Christians in America.
Yeah.
But there's evangelical white Christians, there's Roman Catholics, there's Southern Baptists.
Yeah.
What is your base that you're referring to?
So the unique part of where we sit in the marketplace is, Kirk mentioned Maverick City. So I am one of the owners of Maverick City with one of my business partners, Jonathan J. And the unique thing about Maverick City was that we prioritize diversity. And so we were able to build one of the first groups that had African Americans in it that was able to be played on what we consider CCM radio. So much like pop and R&B in the Christian space, you have Christian and you have gospel. That means white and black. I mean, so no
Very
one
clear. Very
So
clear.
Christian music is white, gospel music is black.
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
So if you hear Christian music, you're gonna have a white person.
Yeah. And there's no ambiguity to what he said.
There's none. So,
None.
Okay.
But can I also, if you mind, if I can also celebrate what he was saying, is that this piece of marketing that Norman and his partners brought to the table is what it did for those spaces that were already biased, is that it humanized the voices in the space.
Exactly.
That's what it did.
Exactly.
Is that it allowed people to see themselves in us, is because being able to have the idea of, we're going to bring cameras into every space. We're going to do intentional marketing to humanize the voices in this space so that they do not sound so iconoclastic, right?
Okay.
That they sound more humanized. And so that has been a great benefit for not only other artists, but also for myself. And I was always a very public person, but in the partnership, I have seen the benefits of being intrusive in a very intentional way so that people can understand the viability and the relevance of not only just these brands, but also the subject matter.
This is interesting, because even this is revolutionary. This partnership feels revolutionary, but it feels pretty new, right? You're talking about a tour in 2022.
Yeah.
But most people look at you as the icon. In terms of gospel music, I mean, it changed even from like the 80s to the 90s. And like when you came and then it was like, it's praise and worship. It's a totally different sound. But gospel music is still part of the music business.
Yeah.
And so at what point did you feel like you've grasped the business, or you still learning up to this point? Obviously, you're learning some new things and finding new ways to market. And as you as a leader in that space, I would say, how are you seeing other artists as you're growing and your brand is building? Are we treating it like a business? Or we always talk about R&B artists who sign these contracts that were so negligent and they didn't know what to ask, and the pride and the kind of naive in the space, but we never really hear it in other genres. Was that an experience in that time as well, leading up to current day where we have more information, more resources, obviously great partners?
The answer for me is very nuanced, because It has been the last decade and a half for me where I've been able to understand the necessity of leaning into longevity that's going to require more of me being more infused and informed, and also having the tools to realize that these are the areas that I can be strong in. See, the difficult thing is that it's not one size fits all for every artist, because there are some artists that are maybe more. They are not extroverts. They may not have the woo-woo-ness about themselves where they can deliver in front of a camera what is necessary for his part of the business. But whatever it is that what I think is very important is that we need more individuals to surround talent in this space to be able to point out those strengths, maximize and manage those weaknesses so that they can be able to have the opportunity to tap into these new tools, or the tools that are now available to them, so that we can talk about diversification and even longevity. And that has not always existed, but it's because, once again, we were not privy to the best entertainment lawyers. We were not privy to the booking agents and to the talent agents. William Morris was not running down our space. And when they were running down our space back in the day, it was only just to collect the dollars just for booking. It was not to really to diversify and get them in television and film like a lot of times it was always promised. And it's not a slate with WME. It's because they're a great company. They're just too big. These companies are too big to be able to be in the minutia of how do we speak. It's almost adjacent to the Tyler Perry model, is that his voice is so wrapped into the experience of the community, is that Hollywood did not know that was a community that even existed. And so it's kind of privy to that space that there is this community. There's this island that has always existed, that now we cannot rely just on Sunday morning to get the message that we exist there. We've got to be able to do it Sunday night, Monday morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, at the club, in the streets, at the barbershop, wherever we go. We've got to be able to have talented conversations, especially with the advent of social media, to let people know that we're aware, we're informed, and we're still relatable to whatever space people need when they need to be inspired and be reminded of life bigger than themselves.
I think you ask a good question, and Kirk, you expounded on a number of things, but the straightforward answer is, yeah, the deal sucked. The deals sucked in gospel like they did everywhere. One of the most disruptive factors of what we did was we were giving royalties to artists without deals. And so we were able to really aggregate some of the best talent in Christian and gospel music at the time, because they didn't have to commit anything to work with us. Tribal in Maverick City Publishing. And so a lot of the buildings didn't like what we were doing. We weren't Nashville based. We weren't old white guys from the Midwest. We were some young black dudes from Georgia. And so that was kind of disruptive in and of itself from a racial standpoint, but also we were trying to push for an all white format at radio to also play black music. And so when you talk about the deals and when you hear about the 90s, the R&B and those horror stories, I mean, Kirk has a horror story. He might not talk about it, I say it, but he had a bad deal at a point.
Yes.
Someone took all of his publishing. Someone took everything from him.
Yes.
And so in this latter part of his career, well, I wouldn't even say the latter part, let God decide that. But at this point in his career, he is now leveraging and monetizing at a way as an entrepreneur. He's the chief creative officer in my company. He makes decisions on what the type of music we're going to put out. We need great, I won't call them gatekeepers, but we need quality control in every genre of music. Not that we need these A&Rs to say this should come out, this shouldn't, but we also need for us, by us. Still at a point. You need people that are in the space that understand his value, understand the artist's value. Everybody's making money, but what happens when you're in one of these majors, the money's going into this vacuum and out to these people that we've never met. You know what I mean? So as an indie label, I know what I need to survive, and I can say, yeah, for real, the artists need to be able to really eat. They need to be able to really see the benefits of the hard work they're doing. He's running around all day promoting his single, his podcast, these things. He should have ownership in that. Where the traditional deal is an artist they own 15% of this master work they created.
Correct.
And they took this loan, essentially, $85,000 to do this, their life's work. Put out their first album. It does amazing. The label's making millions of dollars. They're not going to redo the deal for you. They're not going to come back and give you a bonus. You agreed to it, so you pay back everything you gave us off the 15% royalty that I've given you, and I'm going to keep 85% of every dollar that we made. And then once your 15% has recouped, I'll give you your royalties. And that's on something you created all yourself, and they just gave you the money to do it. I just didn't think that was fair.
So, Kirk, when did you know, it's similar because obviously, okay, you and YG are on opposite sides of the spectrum in life, right? And music.
Theoretically.
Yeah, right?
I don't know YG personally. I don't speak to his spirituality, but
I'm
theoretically.
Saying good guy, but I'm just saying, when somebody looks at YG.
I know him well.
Black man.
But the reason why I say that is because, you know, we had a conversation with YG and he was saying that when he signed his first record deal, it was 5 albums for $25,000.
That makes sense.
And pretty much he didn't know what he was getting himself into.
Absolutely.
And he made mistakes and he learned the business and he realized that he was in a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you was in a bad deal, right?
Yes.
When did you realize that you were in a bad deal?
Well, and I also want to be able to acknowledge it in a space that is that I signed the deal. So it wasn't forced upon me. I signed a deal that was not the most beneficial for me, you know, and I've had to learn how to phrase it that way because sometimes it has been weaponized against me, even though it's truth, that 100% of my publishing was not given to me until almost 20 years into my career. So, you know, and that is very unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. So it was me understanding and realizing as I continued to matriculate in the space that the information that I was not privy to at the very beginning, other artists and other situations, is because what started to happening again was also just the advent of independent individuals, people that were doing it on their own, and people that were doing it on their own. Social media and social platforms gave them a louder voice. And so what started to happen is that the information that was light years away from us getting, now there are artists that are now giving you the information themselves. And as you see younger artists that are now more empowered and now have more of the tools to be able to be strategic in the navigation of their own future, you realize that you need to make some major paradigmatic changes, right? And so in that, you start to have these divine cosmic collisions that give you the information and the resources. One of the first individuals that I became blessed with that really became a great enlightenment for me was an individual by the name of Ron Hill. Ron Hill was an individual that interned with me when he was his senior in college, and this was his space, this was his major, and so he equipped me with the information that I did not have, and he had the skill set. Like he is a walking masterclass, like this individual, like E.J. Gaines, like Phil Thornton, and these are the men of color that are kind of like the wonder kinds that he's pulled together, right? And so with that, you are now able to have all of this wisdom and information that you're able to tap into. And so these were men that I also found in different parts of my journey getting here as well. So the more I understood what I did not have, and the more I was being given the opportunity to understand what I could have, just with a couple little small changes, just some small changes. But those small changes, the value in them has been humbling and overwhelming, and I can't even begin to quantify what it's been for me.
It's been a miraculous journey. As I was thinking about, I remember when you came on the scene in the 90s, and this is like when TRL and that was a thing, and Rap City was a thing, and they were showing your videos.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, this guy's made it to rap. Like, how is this possible? Beating people on the countdowns, and I'm like, that was a CD era, right? So you're making money on CDs. I'm sure you have a bunch of platinum records. I mean, countless. And then music changes.
Yes.
And it's now a streaming era.
Yeah.
Not really your expertise, I would assume.
Yeah.
you are probably familiar with this space. How do you navigate the streaming era coming from an artist who was prominent and thrived in a different era of music?
Yeah, I mean, gospel lag, like many genres. I mean, many different genres of music at that time. Gospel remained primarily physical for quite some time. I think that changed in the past 3 to 5 years. When I came into the space, it's something I noticed. They were, you would have artists post, don't go on Apple Music, don't go on Spotify, buy my, actually download, actually buy. And what they were fighting was a tide that was going to overwhelm them. I think, one of the main things I focused on was embracing change, because the change was coming. It was inevitable. It's like attempting to stop people from using AI now. Like music people are really anti-AI now. The change is inevitable. So either you're going to figure out a way to adapt to change, or the change is going to move you out the way. I remember when everybody used to have a Kodak camera. Now I know everybody uses their iPhone. The same company also disrupted music. iTunes is the only way to purchase music now. One of the sole ways to purchase music now was not created by the billion-dollar record labels. It was created by a tech company in Silicon Valley, because disruption's going to happen. Now you can adapt to it, or you can think that you're going to stop it. You're not going to stop convenience. We're in America. People love convenience. It's no different than when they were trying to stop Uber from happening, or DoorDash or Airbnb. Imagine telling some people 20 years ago, you're going to have random strangers living in your house when you're not there. You're going to get in the car with some guy you never met before. He's going to take you to your next location, right? Or imagine this. He's going to pick up your McDonald's and drop it off to you at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're actually going to let strangers give them your address, come to your house, and give you your food. That you don't know if, we talk about even back in the day, you don't know if they spit in that. That's what I mean? Like, disruption and convenience are things that we're always going to prioritize as Americans, because that's the type of environment we foster. Now, unless there's some physiological change amongst us, which I don't see happening, convenience is the thing we prioritize. And so when it came to music, it's easier for me to just stream than it is for me to go to Walmart, buy your CD, have a CD player, put it in my car, then listen to it. When I have to do that for every single artist, instead of just putting you all on one playlist, picking my favorite song and listening to it. So I prioritized streaming when I came into the space. I was the guy that actually figured out what the streaming record was in gospel. I went through all the charts for like the past 30 years to put that together with my guy, Phil Thornton. And to shout out the guys that Kirk mentioned, we all have come together. We're one company. They all work at Insignia. They're the C-level executive team that does what Kirk is talking about. We each sit down in every division, and we figure out how the best way to monetize what Kirk is doing, what Mav is doing, what our artists like Ty Galbraith, Chandler Moore, Naomi Rain are doing. And what that gives us a leg up on is, if you look at the charts, it's indicative. If you look at the gospel charts, you'll see that primarily 7 of the top 10 records are released by Tribal, or something we worked on. You keep going down further than that, 8, I think it's 16 out of the top 20. It's because if you don't embrace change, change is going to run you over.
How do you feel about the current state of gospel music?
Personally,
yeah,
I'm very I'm worried. It's the main thing me and this guy discuss all day is, how do we, I'm going to say this for him. After the BET Awards, there was a lot of conversation. The first question this man asked us at dinner was, how do we take this opportunity and make it something that's for the entire genre? And the problem with that is the KPIs that major mainstream institutions look at, many gospel artists don't feel are important. And as long as you don't position yourself in a manner to where you're attractive to the very thing that can broaden the message that we all want to reach everyone, you have to do certain things. It's the Bible, you got to become all things to all men to win some. If you need to be fly, if you need to be able to articulate in a certain conversation, you need to be able to sit down and have a conversation with you guys and be able to articulate and understand business to push forward the gospel, then be ready to do that. Not being prepared for that conversation, to me, is no different than when they buried their talents in the Bible.
That's good.
You know what I mean? That's how I see it. So when I look at the state of gospel music, I look at a lot of people whining and complaining about something they haven't prepared for.
And can I just jump in and say that the whining and complaining also is the fatigue of not being able to have the oxygen reach everyone.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of it is also. See, the blessing and benefit and the challenge of my career is that it has allowed me to have access. I've been blessed to have access with great minds and with spaces that challenge my thinking, challenge me to want to be able to push forward and to have engaging opportunities and conversations to not only enlighten but also be enlightened. Where most individuals in my space, their ecosystem is the Black church, it's the Black conference, it's the Black events, it's the Black spaces where a lot of the information never gets to that level. And so when you find out that there are other conversations that are happening that you're not privy to, that in itself can breed frustration. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it is my passion to want to be a conduit, to try to be a catalyst, to get that information, just to get this, but even if it only impacts one or two, at least we've been able to try to do as much as we can to deposit and invest in individuals that are able to keep the narrative going.
Yeah, it's important. I asked the CD question because I was going to church every Sunday and I was sitting a part of the sound ministry, and I'm making CDs. It's like 2015. I'm like, they don't know that people don't listen to CD. But every Sunday I'm making a CD.
Yeah.
And so it brings me to the point where I'm like, if the church doesn't get younger, where does it go?
Yeah.
It does.
And so when I'm thinking about the numbers that you said, right, from the 90s, I don't disagree with you. Like, there was a large percentage of people that identified as Christian and went to church, to where we're at today. Those numbers, I mean, if you're not declining, if you're not inclining,
you're declining.
You're declining.
To me,
so my question is, like, how do we, the state of the Black church, how do we increase the youth participation in it?
Paul, can I say something about that? Because I don't know if that's entirely true. For me, from the outside looking in, it looks like there's more young people it feels like a renaissance as far as from what I see.
Now it is.
From what I see. Like I said, I'm on the outside looking in. But like, even like spiritual word, it's not really a Christian-based thing, but it started, that's a long story. But long story short.
Well, I'm like, wait, hold on.
What are we talking about?
That's how it started. That's how it started.
Like, now it's like.
That's how what started.
The spiritual word.
Spiritual word, you know spiritual word?
The page.
So spiritual word is a big social media platform. They have millions of followers. If you watch their content, it's not Christian-based at all. But every now and then they'll throw a sermon in, they'll throw some stuff. So I spoke to the owner before and I'm like, your name is spiritual word, but you're not really posting anything spiritually. And he was just saying, like, he started it as a Christian-based platform. It wasn't really getting traction. They changed it to Shade Room, but every now and then he tries to. But long story short, I think that there's a lot of young people that I see that are now becoming religious, embracing that on social media. At least that's what it looks like.
They're spiritual. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's it. There you go.
I think that's the difference. Like,
there you go.
I'm talking about the people, like, people who identify as spiritual. I'm talking about
the spiritual.
Right, the people that are going, like the youth, right? I was a teacher for 15 years. Church wasn't even something that students, it's not even a place that they were going.
Yeah.
And I was in the community that I was teaching. I was going to church there, and I never saw any of my students. I'm like, the church is two blocks away. Nobody's going.
Yeah.
And then it hit me. I'm like, wait, I was looking in New York City. I'm like, are people bringing their children to church, right? You used to have to go with your grandma.
Yeah.
Right? Then your mom stopped going, so you stopped going.
Yeah.
How do we reverse that cycle, though?
Yeah.
One of the key things, and this is to kind of come to what you're saying. What you see and what you feel and what you notice is what you see across the gospel Christian music space is, and I talked to Kirk about this a lot, the struggle that existed in the 80s and the 90s that made our grandma make us go to church. I'm not saying it doesn't exist anymore, but
It's
the
different.
way it exists is different.
Yeah.
When you think about Kirk Franklin's daughter, or I have an 18-year-old, and you guys now, you're talking about young African American men who likely are millionaires. The way we raise our children is totally different than how we came up. And so what we sought from the Black church in the 80s and the 90s isn't the same thing my daughter's going to seek from church.
Yeah.
They're seeking a different experience. And when you seek that different experience, it's a different environment. And so a lot of times now you have young African-American kids that go to what we would consider evangelical white church because they want to hear a different style of music. That's where their friends go. That's who they went to college with. That's who they're working with. So no, they're not going to go to the Baptist church around the corner. They're going to the mega church over here because everybody likes the place they can't get in. Even churches.
Or watch it online.
Or watch it online. The thing that happened with COVID is that black churches were disproportionately unprepared for streaming.
Yeah, buddy.
When it came time to stream, we are experiential people. So we ain't have cameras. What they ain't believe is they weren't good. They was making CDs still in 2020.
Yeah, buddy.
So they was making CDs and selling the pastor sermon. Every the evangelical white churches, they were prepared. They were streaming already. They were having huge numbers already.
Yeah.
And that's why you saw the advent of Pastor Mike Todd, and that's why his church blew up. It's because he was one of the few black pastors at the time that was
tapped in. It was tapped in.
Tapped in and ready to go. And Maverick City at the time, they were one of the only groups still making music. They blew up at the time. They became the worship team for all of America. And so, much like anything else, once streaming was necessary, then everybody's trying to catch up. Everybody's trying to get there. One of the foundations of my company was we were doing almost 700 services for churches from my house every Sunday during COVID. Because churches, they didn't know how to stream it. And then at that point, people started to record early because you had to be live. And then Facebook was crashing, YouTube was crashing. You had to have a way to have a redundancy. And a lot of churches just didn't have or could afford to set that up last minute. So what we're talking about and how when you talk about things are growing, it's growing. It's just not growing in the black church.
Well, and then I also want to jump in and say, if you don't mind, it's growing, but it is not growing in the traditional monotheistic ideal that we were raised at. It is very much Jesus adjacent. It's very much
what's that mean?
Meaning that you have now younger Christians that don't believe in Jesus and crystals. That it's both and now, where there is this pluralistic ideal that has permeated Western Christianity in the younger generation, and a lot of these churches that they go to are almost like Christian spas. The Christian spas, you're going to get your neck rubbed, you're going to feel good, you're going to get your feet done, you're going to get your head done. You know, everything is about the betterment. It's almost like spiritual TED Talks. So it's not challenging people. And so you got to remember, man, think about gospel music. Gospel music talked about the cross, talk about the blood of Jesus, and talk about, God forgive me for my sins.
He's able.
Yeah, he's able. I mean, you talk to a younger generation, what's sin? What's sin? Sin is a man-made construct to a lot of these individuals. And so this is not to demonize the next generation. I'm saying that these things begin to also filter down to the music. It's going to impact the music. When you are a gangster rapper, it's hard to still rap like that when you move to Brentwood. It's easy to rap like that when you still live in Compton. But when you move to Beverly Hills, it's going to affect your music. It's going to affect the fire of your lyrical content. And what has happened is that American culture has moved from and I humbly can't say all of it is bad. It's because I think a lot of what we were grouped into, a lot of or indoctrinated into was also dogma. It was also the residue of colonialism, and the residue of Puritanism, and because that's what those are the tenets of Western Christianity. Western Christianity, the tenets are colonialism and Puritanism, and so those did not really speak to the needs.
And slavery.
Well, that is the birth of colonialism and Puritanism. You know what I'm saying? It's like the mama of colonialism and the dad of Puritanism birthed slavery, right? And so we understand that Western Christianity's role in that space, and even what gospel music was at the time, was what? How I got over. Lord, help me to get through. Lord, keep me strong. And so now that we're seeing people being able to be elevated from these spaces, it's going to impact the music, and it's also going to impact their idea of who God is.
Good.
Well, let me ask you this. You guys spoke about tech a lot. Another one of our friends, Timberland, he got a lot of heat recently.
So
You saw that?
we're working with him on something.
Okay. He
Not
signed
that, but
he signed an AI artist.
yeah.
And people were very disappointed in him.
Mm-hmm.
They were let down. The artist said that he was betraying the art of music, and that some people even went as far to say that this is demonic. I saw. What is your thoughts on AI's role in music?
Anything can be used for the good of God. Anything. I believe that. I don't believe anything under the sun it cannot be used for the benefit of God. So whether that's AI, whether that's whatever, I mean, there's certain things that are, people. Someone said, "Well, what about porn?" Well, sex was created by God to be in the confines of marriage. So I'm just gonna come to that point to say everything has a purpose that God intended for it. As it pertains to Timberland overall, I'm gonna stick to what I said earlier. You can fight the tide all you want. The tide is gonna overwhelm. Will people decide that they don't like to listen to an AI-generated artist? We don't know yet. It's like being early to anything, right? If you talk about being early in the streaming, people say, I'll never download Spotify. I'll never download Apple Music. The artists don't get the money. They're paying pennies on the dollar. Now you couldn't find a CD if you wanted one. You know what I mean? So to me, I believe Timberland's early. I believe he's maybe too early. I think he's going to be the one that bears the brunt of the frustration of art that artists exist in, because you're saying basically you're taking publishing, you're taking royalties, and you're giving them all to the person that creates this AI entity. But I believe that's where music will go. When you talk about 10, 20 years from now, I do believe many artists will simply be AI creations from the minds of the Kirk Franklins of the world, from the minds of the Drakes of the world, from the DJ Khaled's of the world, from the whatever, because it's just going to be more convenient. I don't got to get a session together. I don't got to pay for studio time. I don't got to pay producers. Whenever you can find a throughput to cheaper and higher ROI, you cannot fight the tide of efficiency. People are not going to do something that is inefficient for the feeling of it. Even if they say that they will on camera, behind the scenes, they're going to figure out a way to do it and mask it under some different umbrella. And I've already heard and had those conversations currently. So 10, 20 years from now, I believe a lot of music will be AI, mood-driven. Imagine you being able to pick up your phone and based on how you're feeling, it creates music to make you feel, and I'm getting ready to go to the club, boom. You got exactly what you want. I'm getting ready to go to church. Boom, you got exactly what you want. My wife's about to have a baby. Boom, you got exactly what you want. I need to get my baby to bed. Imagine having the most soothing playlist ever to get your baby to bed. No one's gonna fight that.
One thing that I can say to it. Let me just give just a little. Let me just give just a little small twist to it, if you don't mind. In my time in my book, it's because in the conversation, I'm the OG at the table, right? I'm 87 years old, right? I remember the advent of the conversation of cloning, and I remember how big I think you know where I'm going. And it was a big conversation, and people had a lot of anxiety about cloning. You didn't know where it was going. One thing that I think that you can never ever duplicate, and I think that the younger generation continue to speak loud about this as well, is authenticity. One thing that you will not be able to just manipulate is authentic voices. It's because no matter how much information and technology continues to grow, we are still, with our species, given these interesting dynamics of emotions and affections, that we still look for authentic voices to speak into. And I believe that storytellers, even though the stories may be told different, there still has to be a certain level of authenticity to the story that I believe that only our species can deliver. And that's why I believe that you didn't see much of cloning continue to advance, is because people still want to be able to hold in a time where the survival of our species is already so questionable with the political tension that we see globally. When we see this geopolitical tension that we're living in right now, people are begging and pulling for something that is foundational, something that is rooted in something that they can. It's almost like what reminds me of one of my favorite movies is Inception. And I love the fact that in Inception, he was able to go into these different levels of these unrealities, but he needed something to remind him of the truth, right? And so he needed that spinner.
A little dreidel.
Yeah, just to remind him of truth. So as much as technology and informations and as humans that we advance, I believe that one thing about art, and the reason why real art is because you're even talking about, think about as much as technology information has continued to grow, a Picasso still has its value. Is that because there's something authentic about the narrative of where this individual was when he painted it. And so I think that music and storytellers are still going to have a place. We're going to find these ebbs and flows of AI and different levels of technology, but I'm still comfortable that when people have pain, they're going to need a real voice to speak to that pain.
You bring up a good point in terms of AI and music, but I want to know your thoughts about AI in the church, because we've seen agentic agents that are now pastors. We've seen pastors who use AI to help create sermon. That's a complete shift, right? When we're talking about obviously the story of the Bible, interpretation of it, but the authenticity of the actual person who's delivering the message. Do you see that becoming disruptive, AI inside of the actual church?
I don't know.
I still believe that as we continue to try to push and see how far these barriers can go or these boundaries can go, I do believe that there still will be a ceiling that will happen in the hearts and minds of individuals, that they will still find a space that they still want to be able to. It's like, for example, and I say this with great humility, great gratefulness. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would you ever thought that people would have stayed up to 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning to hear a 55-year-old gospel artist end a Black award show?
Only if his name was Kirk Franklin.
Well, forget him. He ain't about that. I'm just saying that it still says that for individuals, there's still something about voices that they still want to be able to hear and hold on to. And so even though there's a myriad of voices that have advanced far beyond Kirk Franklin, there's still something, by the grace of God, I'm very grateful. I don't know why, but it's still something that whatever the music that God trusted to loan me still anchors some people. And so I believe that no matter how much we try to curate these ideals outside of humans, people are still going to want that pastor, that social leader, that artist, that storyteller to be the one to say, I'm telling this because I lived it. This came from me being in prison. This came from me being in jail. This came from me having a cancer scare. And so I am aware, but I'm not afraid.
I only ask that because it goes back to the first question of if there's less people actually going to the institution of the church, right? And they're getting more influence from
Then we're
outside.
building new churches. We're building new churches. This is church now.
Absolutely.
This is church.
The church is a gathering of believers. And
There you go.
I think we'll have a unique concept on it. I think
Den of Kings.
Den of Kings church.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is two things, and I don't want to conflate them. I don't think you'll ever eliminate actual people making music. I don't think we'll eliminate it. I do believe there will be AI artists. It's no different. I used to work in banking, and I remember when I first started working in banking, it's probably, I'm aging, so I'm 40 years old. I was 20 years ago, basically. I was young. I was in college. I was one of the personal bankers. And they talked about how people, no matter what's happening in online banking, people will always want to come into the bank to meet with somebody and have a conversation. Okay, when's the last time any of us in here have been inside a bank? The point I'm making is people still go inside the bank. I'm not saying anything will be eliminated, but the way we do it will drastically change. All of us have a bank app on our phone right now. And back when I started the bank, that was foreign. People came into the bank to learn how to download the app, log in. I don't want to put my password in there. We relax all of that for convenience. And that's why the only way I see technology slowing down and changing our way of life is if we decide philosophically that convenience isn't the thing that drives how we spend our money.
And that's where I lean in. Exactly that little crack of light that he just said is I believe that problems, challenges, sickness, struggles, issues are things that will force individuals to respond differently at different moments in time is because we are wired to. Is that one thing that we cannot do is we cannot unwire the human species and our experiences.
Well, Kurt, let me ask you this. As far as you talked about off camera, sometimes it's difficult when you're looked at a certain way, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're a regular R&B artist or a rapper or, you don't have the same pressures as somebody who's looked at as a man of God.
Yeah.
You're held to a higher standard.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Fortunate.
Fortunately,
Fortunate and unfortunate.
yeah, both.
I think so.
I would love to hear the fortunate.
I mean, the fortunate part of it is that people honor you in a way that they don't honor certain artists when they come in here. There's certain artists that come in here, they have not to speak for y'all, there's a certain reverence for you because you maintain a standard of living. Now, it's not to say you're perfect, but it's fortunate also because God sees it. That's one. But two, there's a respect that, they're not in here not to say you got smoke. They wouldn't be in here just smoking blunts when you come in. They're not going to be in here just with liquor. There's a reverence and respect. Not to say those things are wrong.
Right.
That's just a reverence and respect. That's why I'm being fortunate and unfortunate.
Yeah, there's a tie between, like I said, when I heard your voice, I'm like, oh my God, I've heard that voice so many times. There's a connection in the home, there's a connection in the church, and there's a connection in real life. So when people see you, there's just a level of automatic respect. Outside of it, yes, that's the OG, but it's like, no, that's a man of God. Like, no, he's not Jesus Christ, but he's a follower of Jesus Christ.
And
I'm a follower.
I have not found it in my career and in my lifetime to be fortunate.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I want to get that perspective.
Yeah,
I knew that. But
I know he's going to say why not, but that's why.
Yeah, I have not. Yeah, and I have not found it beneficial for even those that also serve in that role as well. Mm-hmm. I think that it is the greatest misnomer of our human experience. It's once again going back to the very much of the iconoclastic ideals. I'm not Catholic. And I know that there are beautiful people, there are beautiful humans on this planet that subscribe to Catholic ideals. But when you look at the corruption that has happened historically in Catholicism for centuries, for millennia, and the Roman Catholic Church to still maintain its power and influence on the globe, it is because humans still want to hold on to, they still need an idea of a tangible individual to usher them into the presence of God because they do not feel worthy enough. Mm-hmm. That in itself is problematic on so many levels. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to say that if you respond to me different than you do Lil Wayne, I'm saying I find that extremely problematic. It's because God doesn't. God does not view me different than Lil Wayne. Mm-hmm. And so those are the things that I continue to be committed to deconstruct is because it's problematic for the person that you do it to, and it's problematic for the person that you do it against.
Well, on that.
That's my soapbox. I'm sorry.
No, that was extremely insightful. The Jamaica situation, right? Mm-hmm. These are people that are Christians. Mm-hmm. So how does that play? Because that's a whole different conversation of like, okay, it's one thing for people to judge you a certain way but it's like now you got religious people.
Yes.
Who that's even more because you don't want to offend somebody.
Yes.
And that's the same religion as you.
Yes.
So how did that impact you?
Well, and I also think that it reveals even this conversation because it wasn't all Jamaicans. It was some Jamaicans, but there were other Jamaicans that would, like if you were into the comment section, they were having their own arguments about it. There was one Jamaican that said, y'all wanted him to have a suit on and pass out. And y'all know, and they said, and you know our healthcare system down here, son. You know what I'm saying? And I thought that was hilarious. So, but once again, I think that it's the tension because dogma has led the narrative for our species on the planet of how we process God and what we think is godly. And so what I have to do is I have to understand those nuances. I can't fight them. I have to pick and choose when I fight them. I have to pick and choose when I speak against them. And I have to pick and choose when it's time to acquiesce to that reality. It's because there is a reality that I exist in that I understand. That's the construct of a lot of individuals that subscribe to monotheistic ideals. And so because of that, I must digress in moments, acquiesce to the reality of that, and try to maneuver the best that I can with truth and authenticity.
I think to your point, just to add, is that most often we read the Bible, but we don't comprehend it. You know, the same people, they're ignoring that David danced out of his clothes. They just ignore that whole entire scripture. He literally danced out of his clothes,
and was an adulterer at the same time.
You know, and a murderer. He killed his best friend, took his wife, had a kid with her.
Yeah.
It's better than any Real Housewives you ever watched. But this is the man after God's own heart.
Yes.
That's who he was.
Yes. Moses, the murderer, was the one that God used. But we don't say Moses the murderer, but Moses was a murderer.
And this is the key to all of this. When you talk about believers disagreeing, and all, we all want to see ourselves in the Bible as the heroes, right? When people look at the Bible, everybody wants to be David or Joseph or Jonah or Paul. We would more likely be the people when the woman got caught in the act of adultery, holding the stones ready to stone her.
That's good.
That's who we are. That's who we are as believers now. We have cancel culture.
At our core,
we are cancel culture. I'm more saved than you. I'm not as bad as you.
Yes.
I'm not having pride and being a prideful person that has to whatever is as bad as any other sin.
And if we look at it biblically, it's also, if we look at it biblically, it is really the greater. I mean, there's not a greater sin, but if you look at how much it returns in Scripture, pride is the one. Pride is one. But you know, growing up in church, if you were sleeping, having sex for marriage, you was going. You know, it's something like you felt like that's all God cared about. You know what I'm saying? It's who you were smashing in a youth choir.
Well, how do you? It's a thin line. But, okay.
Give me the thin line, friend.
Because one group of people say, like, yeah, you can't be judgmental. Nobody's perfect. Everybody sins. He without sin cast the first stone.
Yes.
All of that.
Yeah.
But that kind of does lead to just doing anything and just saying, well, you know, God knows my heart. The God knows my heart people. They just do anything and they like, yo, God knows my heart.
The problem. I love that.
I'm so ready to respond. Go ahead, King.
I'm quick and I'm gonna give. It's quick. I'm gonna pass it straight to you.
All right.
It's quick. I'm gonna pass it straight to you. It's not. That's not it. So people often believe if you don't slap people with sin, that they are going to then trample on grace.
Yes.
They're going to trample on grace.
We've talked, yes, there you go.
It's clear. You give people grace and truth.
Yes.
Okay. It's having sex outside of marriage or fornication sin. Yes. Is it difficult to stay away from? Yes.
It's both and.
It's both and. And to say that God knows my heart, he does. And that's a good and a bad thing. God knows whether you believe in him truly or you don't. So when you say God knows your heart, yeah, he does. That's what I always tell someone. And at the same time, you should judge people. You should tell them the truth. You should say to your homeboy, hey, bro, you got to stop smashing all them girls. But can I tell my homeboy I understand why he's smashing all those girls? Yes. And that's the part that gets missed. Is that when you go to church often, yeah, you hear you shouldn't do that, but you don't hear the empathy behind, I understand why, and here are how and ways you cannot do that. That's the part that's missing.
And please let me jump in and say this. The reason why on this planet, the Protestant faith has so many different denominations is because of that issue right there. It's because people need to control the narrative of the process of other humans. So the Methodists will say, okay, you guys are trying to take advantage. And so from that, then you get the Pentecostals. And then the Pentecostals say, well, you got to live holy. Okay, well, yeah, but you can only live holy on the Sabbath. So you get the Sabbath Pentecostals. It's like when you look at the Protestant faith in America, no other branch of faith has so many denominations like the monotheistic ideal of Christianity. That's problematic. You've got Pentecostal, you've got Church of God in Christ, you've got Apostolic, you've got PAW, which is probably the same thing. You've got Methodist, you got Lutheran, you got Baptist, you got Missionary Baptist. I mean, so many branches, and it was all birthed out of this idea. Okay, well, y'all are taking advantage of this. Well, y'all don't do this enough. And it becomes so overwhelming that guess what people do? Now, here we are 25 years later, 34% people going to church. That's what's happened.
Or because non-denominational.
No. Well, even non-denominational, once again, some of that is now becoming country clubs, TED Talks, becoming all these other frameworks. It really is.
Non-denominational is a reaction to all of the denomination. It's a denomination in and of itself.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
It's like atheism is a reaction to belief in God.
Nobody argues with you if you want to go drink 1492 at your club.
1942.
I say that means I don't go. I don't go. You just saw.
We don't know it.
What I just call it? My point exactly. And guess what? If you wanted to drink 1492, I would not argue with you.
Yeah.
I would allow you to drink whatever nasty drink you want to drink. It's because there is no debate outside of this space because people allow you to be you. But when you come here, we think that we've got to hold people to a standard that God does not even hold us to. And it's becoming overwhelming, and we're missing people with the great news and the simple, because here's the simple message, Kings. God made man, man rejected God, and God won't stop until he wins man back.
Amen.
Amen.
It's that simple.
Amen.
Anything else is problematic.
Norman, Kirk, we must do this again as we wrap.
I don't want to rap. I want to, come on, give me some more. Give me two more. Give me two more, man. I love the platform. I'm super fans. Give me two more. Can we do two more?
I ain't got nothing to do.
You got my man all sharp coming up here. Come on, man. Let us give us some more.
He was on point. I was going to actually go. I mean, we could talk about do it again before we go, but I was going to talk about that prosperity, right, and doing God's work, and that fine balance, right. As they see you achieving success, why does he have that? Is he really following God? Is he? I mean, look at what he's doing with his money. People watching that. How do you deal with that outside of that from a mental standpoint? Because the mental health piece is important too inside the church. How do you manage that?
I'll do the mental health part. You do the financial.
The prosperity thing, I think the easier way to look at it is this. I've always held this belief. It's easier to look at it from this vantage point. I think we all can relate to the thing of a homeless man comes and knocks on your door. He wants $100, right? Or he wants money. And people always say, I don't give homeless people money because I don't know what they're going to do with it, right? There's this idea as Americans that we have. It's Western. It's very Western. That unless the person does with the money what I intend for them to do with, I don't want to give it.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is the principle is about a heart. It's about a heart issue. It's a heart issue. The truth is we're selfish.
Yeah.
And instead of just saying we're selfish, we say, he gonna go buy drugs. Well, where do you get that from? Where do you get the notion from that when you give money to your church, they have to spend it the way you would want them to spend it? The biblical principle is about you giving to God first.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. The biblical principle about giving to the homeless is about giving to charity. Who cares what the homeless man does with the money? Yeah. The reward for you is that your heart posture is in the right place. So this is how I see prosperity and ministry. They're doing a job. They're making money. God walks on gold. The result of being excellent at anything is generally success. And in America, or in most cultures, success generally leads to wealth. If a pastor is wealthy, it doesn't hurt me. It doesn't hurt anyone that when someone looks at him, they see, okay, boom. So people ask me all the time.
There's a thing of taking advantage of your congregation.
No, there's some people that do.
That happens.
And there's CEOs that take advantage of their customers.
That's true.
In no way of business or walk of life is, I don't want to use the term perversion, but where it is, perversion exists. Yeah. So there are CEOs that take advantage of people. You had this Sam Blackman-Fine that had FTX. He stole billions of dollars from people. Bernie Madoff was the head of the NASDAQ. He stole billions of dollars from people. Are there pastors that steal from the congregation? Yes. Are there pastors that don't? Yes. Are there CEOs that don't treat their workers right? Yes. Or do people still work there? Yes. So are you going to throw away your iPhone because you don't like or did you stop getting Ubers because there was Uber culture and they were being mean to women? No, everybody still ordering Ubers today. So what I don't like people's disingenuous approach to how they problem solve anything else. There's bad churches, they're good churches. There's bad pastors, there's good pastors. There's terrible CEOs, there's good CEOs. And we still, we're on a Target boycott. Target's earnings have increased quarter over quarter. We're boycotting. I'm just saying that when we disagree with something, we're saying we're against something, it doesn't stand. But we do hold it really tightly against the church. Yes, I'm okay with a pastor being rich, just as I'm okay with a CEO being rich.
What I can say though is that it also is necessary to continue to teach people that the institution of church and the ones that run these institutions, we cannot model our pursuit of God through them. Yeah. And I think that those are the constructs that I'm always committed to deconstruct with American culture and with global ideals that are monotheistic. Is that we've got to get to people, and that was the part of the of even the Reformation, right? Is that Martin Luther at the time was continuing to try to tell people we can go to God now ourselves. And so that is the narrative that Kirk is so passionate about. I'm passionate about like I can be on a plane and it's a little bit adjacent to this conversation. I can be on a plane, bros. And you know, I'm blessed to sit in first class and people are getting on the plane and some people will notice me on the plane and I've heard people say, I know this plane ain't gonna crash now. God on the plane. And I'm thinking, Negro, Christians die in plane crashes every day. People think that because I'm on the plane can't crash. I gotta fix that. We've got to fix that.
The savior complex.
Yeah.
Amen, bro. It happens all the time. So many times I'm in a store, in the mall. Kirk, will you pray for me? I know God hear your prayers, and I have to stop constantly, bro. Or my sister, I need for you to know. First of all, I'd be more than happy to pray for you. But when I do, please know, God hears your prayers just as clear as he does mine. But it is such a constant wiring that's why it's problematic for me when people hold me to a higher standard. It's because I know what it means intrinsically. I know it means that you don't think you're worthy enough to get to God, but I am. And that pisses me off that we have already created that in individuals. And what also pisses me off is that we have religious leaders that are not joining me in trying to debunk that ideal as well.
I think
has it always been that way? Like, there's no bit of ego on the ascension to where you're at now that it wasn't that way? Has it always been that way?
It has always been a problem for me. It has always been. I intrinsically have always been uncomfortable, and it has been difficult for me to see the weaponization of leadership in my community through the space of the Black church in the Black community. Yes, I played for a church that was in a neighborhood in Fort Worth where some of the biggest drug kingpins existed in America. In that small Black neighborhood existed 32 churches in this one neighborhood, 32 churches. But the biggest drug kingpins, crack cocaine in the 80s in America existed in, you can look it up, in Fort Worth, Texas. Some of the biggest kingpins in America lived in Fort Worth, Texas, in this community called Lake Como. 32 churches. But drugs and kingpins were able to exist with no problem. That's a challenge for me. And it was a challenge for me even when I had a Jerry curl. So now going back to the issue of mental health, I believe that religion does contribute to mental health. Religion can contribute to the issues of trauma in our people. It's because if people do not see themselves good enough, how can they become healthy in their finances, in their homes, in their families, in their own mental space, if they feel that they need something to exist outside of them, outside of their creator, to be able to be good individuals, to be able to see themselves as valuable? Is that we need to continue to see church as a hospital, and everybody in there, including the man behind the pulpit, is a patient. No one is a doctor.
Before we leave, the last question, given the times that we're in right now, this is something that do you ever lose hope for humanity? We see what happens in Israel and Iran, and then Palestine, and then Congo and Sudan. And it's just like we've been on this earth for thousands of years and still can't figure out how to live together peacefully. Right. Yeah. And it's like after a while, do you just say like, it's almost like doomed on a certain level, right? Like it's very depressing where we just keep going through these things year after year after year, and people are dying and babies are dying. And it's just like Ukraine, Russia, like,
yes,
given the state of the times that we're in, like, what's your thought process and what's the word for the people?
Yeah, man, let me say this. First of all, even as you begin to talk, I begin to wail inside because I can be very kind of transparent. I feel you. I feel you deeply, brother. It's because, again, I'm 55 years old. I mean, I was raised in the space of faith. That's all I know. And so it has always been problematic for me too. I remember September 11th and how that following Sunday, you would think that Drake was performing at the church because we're standing in line only because people were trying to get in because people were so afraid. And then as that began to wear off, then people began to go, I remember when George Floyd happened, like we all know, and people were so adamant about trying to make change, and then it just begins to go away. I believe that what's going to make a greater change that can be more substantial and more substantive, that we can be able to see consistently, is that I need the help of other leaders that will push the narrative of our broken humanity and the fact that we are not perfect individuals. And I think that as long as we have that as long as we continue to celebrate and push our political leaders like Donald Trump and other individuals that do not reflect any attributes of a Christian character, is that we will continue to become victims and slaves to these ongoing problems, because these problems have to do with the wickedness of the hearts of the leaders. And until we acknowledge that there is a seed given in every human of choice, and when people have the ability to choose evil, we must hold that decision accountable, not with creating other levels of evil, but with the level of unified compassion, unified grace, unified love that has a uniformity, that collectively we say that this is the answer. Is that this love and grace that they need is the same love and grace that I need. Because see, here's the problem with the arguments of judgment. The arguments of judgment is that people never include themselves in the argument. You are just as guilty as I am because you are just as dirty, even though you may then shoot somebody and you thought a bad thought. And in the eyes of God, it is just as equal as anybody else. And until we begin to see ourselves as the needy and not the ones that are always having, is that until that paradigm shifts, we will, for millennia after millennia after millennia, have this question and this conversation. I don't know the answer right now. I don't know the when. I don't know the how. But I do know that the tools are there and the answers are there. We just don't respond to it. We don't pick it up. We you can create the medicine, but how to get people to take it is the lifelong response of our species of how do we do that?
And my simple answer to it is that I don't lose hope in humanity. It reminds me that God is real. As long as sin exists, we'll have death. As long as there's disparity, we're going to have war. And the answer to it all is God alone. And so it gives me hope. You use the perfect examples. I think oftentimes moments, all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. So a 9/11, there are people that were saved from 9/11.
Yeah.
When you look at what's happening in Palestine and Israel, they aren't ways that we would have decided to do things to draw people to God, but he knows and he does all. And then the perfect example for me is this. If I had to save the world, I only have one son. I only have one son. If I had to save the world, there's no way that if I could do it any way possible, you got one son. If I could do it any way possible, that I would choose to kill my only son, put him on a cross, send him through the most brutal, embarrassing death you could think of.
For all mankind.
For all mankind. So if that is how God decided to save the world, I can only imagine the things that we look at as evil or bad and the actual intent of those things can be something good. Because when we look at the struggle that Jesus went through, none of us could imagine and say that if my only son went through that something good would come of it. The only way we know good came of it now is because it's been centuries and the story's been told. The story will be told of some of these things we look at. It's calamity, and there could have been some good in it.
I honestly like his answer much better than mine.
Thank you, brothers. Appreciate the conversation.
Appreciate y'all, man.
Gotta do it again.
Honored.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and go pick up Do It Again. It's
out right now.
Get that. Go
Den
get
of Kings, check it out.
Go get that.
It's on the YouTube, Kirk Franklin, and it's we are so grateful how people are responding to it. It's really dope.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have it, guys.
Man, this was dope, man.
No,
Appreciate
it was
it.